were to give an advice from on, probably going back on this decision or in some sort of way shaping the decisions he has taken, what would you advise him to do? Hello and welcome to another episode of Policy on the Go, coming to you from Gringo TV. Today we stand at a pivotal moment in modern economic history. Last week, in what he called Liberation Day, US President Donald Trump unveiled sweeping new tariffs, what many described as an aggressive pivot from global cooperation to economic isolation. It marks the most radical shift in America's trade policy in over a century. But this isn't just about policy, it's a blunt force blow to the global order. What we're seeing now isn't simply a trade dispute, but a full-blown economic confrontation. China has already retaliated with a 34% tariff on American goods, and the US is actually still threatening to double down. These shockwaves are rattling industries, inflaming markets, and dragging developing economies like ours into the fallout. For Africa, the consequences go beyond balance sheets. This new tariff strikes at the heart of industries that were just beginning to compete globally, from South Africa's strained exports to Nigeria's fragile manufacturing base. The pain is both immediate and systemic. So today we ask, what's building beneath the surface? What should African leaders do in the face of what some are calling economic sabotage, masked as nationalism? Joining me in this discussion is Anthony Bisong, Research Associate at the Center for Studies of the Economies of Africa, and Ashraf Esmail, Director and Founder of FinPact Limited, an impact investment advisory firm, and also previously the Chief Investment Officer at Grofin. It's so good to have you both joining us on the program. I'll start with you, Anthony. We have you in the studio. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
It's great to have you join us. So let's get right into it. First of all, we'll look at when the tariffs were announced. I want to get your reaction on that. During this past few weeks that we've had Trump increase this sweep, we've had Trump announce this sweeping tariffs, especially through, all the goods that are coming into the US. How would you describe that reaction, that response by the President of the United States, especially from the African context? What's your thought on that? Do you see it as a turning point for Africa, or is it safe to say it's a full-blown crisis? So looking at this past few weeks, how would you describe it, especially in terms of following the announcement by the President of the United States?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, on his inauguration day, he made a comment, part of the US aid to Africa, from humanitarian support for health and humanitarian services, he had to cut it off. So I knew it was doomsday for Africa. But at the same time, it was a call for African leaders to sit back and then look inwards and develop indigenously, rather than looking out for aid. For me, aid for development in Africa, I think it's something a leader should have called off before now, and then try to see how they can develop policies to push for that. So April 2nd announcement, we saw it coming, then even if Africa was not really the target, lots of African countries were mentioned, the tariff went across boards. So it's really important that we sit back and we understand a lot has been happening in trade. Our share to global GDP trade, it's not really significant, but it's called 3%. We're looking at pushing for that. And then I think the call is also an opportunity for Africa to increase intra-African trade. We need to trade within ourselves. Even if intermediate goods, we've been doing fantastically well post-COVID. From 2021 up till now, we've been recording a bit of surplus. And then looking at Africa and US trade, from the AGOA, it's been a deficit for US and then a surplus for Africa. So it's really going to affect industries. But we look forward to further deliberations on the issue.
All right. So let me come to you, Ashraf. We have Ashraf joining us from Mauritius as well. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Looking at this announcement by the President of the United States, how would you describe that response, that reaction or response by him, rather? Do you see it as a crisis or a turning point for Africa, and especially?
I think from Mauritian and broader African perspective, I probably call it a strategic inflection point rather than a full. These tariffs, you see, they are adding some volatility, especially for countries that have the global supply chains dependent on US demand. But then they also signal the need for Africa to pivot, moving from a position of vulnerability to more of a self-determined and a regionally anchored model where we have to look at our own existence, and become self-dependent as a trading bloc with our, potential partners, and we need to look beyond the US and not see ourselves as confined to only one kind of trading relationship.
Heralding America's total abandonment of the World Trade Order, and they say it's an embrace of protectionism, especially in the international system. In your assessment, what would be the ripple effect of these tariffs, especially in terms of relationships in the international global system? What do you think the ripple effect would be? I'm looking at this embrace of protectionism as some people have described it. How do you think it's going to affect the relationships in the global system in general?
The global ripple effect is rather mixed. On the downside, it would obviously disrupt trade flows and inflationary pressures, but all of which would affect the African economies indirectly. But positively, it creates also the urgency for Africa to reduce over-dependency on the traditional trade partners and deepen intra-African trade. We need to invest in our local chains and foster a more South-South partnership and relationship. There's no need to panic right now, but there's a need for urgency. We have room to recalibrate and, through our policies that should aim to promote regional integration, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we need to encourage more local production and secure some diversified partnership, especially with Europe, with Asia, and broaden our reach. Mauritius on its own has done something along these lines over the past couple of decades, and this playbook can be scaled across the continent.
All right, thank you so much, Ashraf. Let me come back to you, Anthony. Have you in the studio? As we know, like I earlier said, China has fired back with a 34% increase in tariffs on the U.S. goods. So now the question is, would you advise that Africa retaliates in doing that? Do you think we have the capacity to do that, to retaliate with China, putting in their own faults? Do you advise African leaders to actually retaliate in the sense of also saying, because America has turned their backs on us, so should we also turn our backs on America? Do you think we should follow suit in that response by China?
Okay, first of all, we really don't. There's actually an institution set up for trade disputes, that is the WTO, of which the chair is even an African. So it's really important. In her speech shortly after the announcement by Trump, she said she's already getting queries from other countries, settlements and all. So they really need to look at that. And like I said, it's a call for renegotiation. So Africans don't really need to retaliate. And we already have, there's an AGOA, there's the African opportunity, the AGOA, which is a Growth Opportunity Act, which are already in place. So it's really important that we get to stick by the rules, renegotiate if need be, and then follow due process. Due process is by heading to WTO. There's a dispute settlement system already set up by WTO. So you go there and then they can take it up from there. So they need to retaliate. And going by in the trade ecosystem, the US they are part of the big players in global trade. And Africa as a whole, like I told you earlier, we have just 3% contribution to global trade, merchandise trade, trade in goods. So it's really important we sit back and re-strategize internally and not follow the route of retaliation. First of all, I would say this announcement, Africans might not be direct, and in fact, might not be direct on Africa. We're looking at China and other countries, who are exploiting, who, according to the president, they are really adding to their trade deficit. So it's more of an indirect effect on Africa, but we really need to sit back and then follow the process, do the necessary consultation to strengthen, first of all, our RECs, that's our regional economic communities, to that we trade in bloc. You can see for EU, they are on the beneficial end because US knows that EU are strong, they are going into trade as a bloc. You can see that in all of that, they are still studying the effect. And I remember effect on the 5th of April. So we look out for the days ahead. But as a continent, and then in countries that were affected by the tariff, needs to follow due process. head to WTO, and WTO will take it up from there.
Okay, so now looking at Trump's defense, I think we already mentioned a bit of that earlier, because now in Trump's defense, he says that the reason that these tariffs are needed is to close America's trade deficit, because America is importing more than they're exporting. And in Trump's description, that is giving wealth to foreigners. That's how he described it. So that is painting the picture that he's actually doing this for his people, and he's trying to protect people, and it is in the benefit of the Americans. So, if you were an American, I mean, want to look at this objectively now. If you were an American, would you say this is to the benefit of myself? If you put yourself in the shoes of Americans, that yes, what Trump has done is actually beneficial to the Americans, and he's putting his people, and it's the right thing to do. How do you assess that?
Yeah, for every policy, there's a cost. There's also a benefit. The benefit for Trump and then his, might like the American goal that is, trying to bridge the gap and then see that they move towards surplus. But like I said, Americans, they have lots of, first of all, bilateral agreement with some pacts, with countries, some with blocks, regional blocks, and all of. So it is important that it's reviewed, but the effect definitely there will be a rise in consumables in the US. Definitely there would, especially for consumables. So it's important in the short run, just like I said, the effect on might be high, but if I was to be an American, I would possibly look out for better ways of negotiating this, not just coming out. If you have targets, talk to them, and, you have, just like in Africa, we have their goal. So it's important, African Growth and Opportunity Act. It's important that, okay, it's expiring by September. Okay, let us renegotiate. Since you're charging us this for exports to Africa, US exports to Africa, why not, and then trade is a win. And like I said, open trade policy and then trade liberalization, it gives advantage to both the developing, least developed countries. There are different categories. Everybody have you look out for the GDP, first of all, country's economy, if it's tied to trade, and then you take it up from there. I believe it was not he really, due consultations were not made, and WTO would have been carried along, in all of this, since it's really at the multilateral level. And then, call the big players. You have the likes of China, Vietnam, you have Cambodia, and in Africa, in African continent, the only country that made it up to adding to their deficit is even South Africa, because of their high export of automobiles and all of that. So it's really important, and gold. So it's really important, like I said, it's better you negotiate. Trade is a give and take. You cannot have it all. You cannot have it all. It's not like business where you will be at the profit end. But he needs to understand that each country are different levels of development. And then thank you.
So let me come back to you, Ashraf. I don't know if you can hear me, but I also want to hear your thoughts on that as well. Because you said Trump did all of this supposedly for the sake and the benefit of the Americans. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that this step that he has taken is actually in benefit or good for the American people? Do you agree with that, if we want to look at it objectively?
Yeah, so I think you have to just look at what's happening on the stock exchange, and the one the Dow Jones and that Nasdaq, S&P is all going consumer, and the American population. I mean, their retirement savings are going to take a big hit. This will also translate into direct, impact on inflation, and prices will go up. And to contain that inflation, obviously the Fed is going to react and increase rates. It's only going to affect and become a very significant pain to the population. How long it will take to recalibrate and to normalize again, we can't say for sure for now. But 90 years of WTO and the whole fabric of the global trade, and that has been totally broken down now, and we are now looking at instead of multilateral agreements, and we will have to rely on bilateral agreements between countries, and it's a question of muscle game now. who's the strongest will command the negotiation. And yeah, I mean, according to the US will be forced to come down to the negotiating table. This can't go on forever. It will impact significantly all the supply chains, and we can't go back kind of state. We need to move towards a more naturalized and more, kind of normalized way of doing it, where there is predictability, and we can't continue living in a situation where you can't expect anything to happen with Trump, going back and forth on policies that affect global trade. So that's my take on it. And I do hope they get some sense and come back to the negotiating tables with their major trading partners.
All right, thank you so much, Ashraf. And let me also come to another point as well. So, some people are of the opinion the positive side of this, especially for Africa, is that it will be a wake up call for Africa to reimagine its trade priorities and, of course, reduce their dependence on global north. What are your thoughts on that line of thinking? Do you think that all of this should or could wake up call for us to reimagine and to redefine our trade priorities, especially in relations with the global north? How should we approach that?
No, that is a wake up call. I mean, we had one after COVID, and we woke up to the reality that we need to be more resilient. And now we need to think broadly in terms of who do we depend on in terms of our trade strategy, and focusing more on intra-African trade, South-South alliances, and strategic industrial policy going forward. The global north will always act in interest. Africa must do the same. Definitely, we need to broaden our relationships with Asia, with Europe, and forge stronger ties with Asia and the Middle East also. Diversification works, and that is something that we have to pursue going forward.
All right, thank you so much, Ashraf. Before we continue the conversation, we're going to take a short break. Take a pause on the conversation, and when we come back, we'll look into what our African leaders must do to reposition ourselves to ensure that we're recession-proof through the shockwave. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Policy on Go, coming to you from Green Growth TV. And we've been having a discussion on this recent Trump tariffs that we've been seeing with my wonderful guests, Ashraf and Anthony. So I'll come to you, Anthony. Looking at all of this that has happened now, there's a lot of shockwaves going through the industry. How would you advise African leaders? What would you expect them to do to ensure that we're recession? Because if we're not careful, of course, the economies will be affected. And if we're not careful, this might lead to a recession, not just even in Nigeria, globally. So, what would you advise our leaders do to ensure that we are recession proof through these times?
Okay, yeah. First of all, we have the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, of which I believe African leaders need to work together to make it work. It's already operational, but we're not really trading that much. So it's high time we start trading with ourselves. Data from WTO for 2023 shows that intra-African trade has increased in 2023 marginally by 3.2%. So it's really, really important that we trade with ourselves. First of all, looking at regional economic communities, RECs, we need to leverage on that. It's really, really important. Just like we have ECOWAS, first of all, we had the ETLS, the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme. It needs to be fully activated, and ECOWAS member states needs to trade with themselves. We have the EAC, that is the Eastern African Community. So it's really important. And then the SADC. So it's really important that of these blocks strengthen their bilateral trade relationship. We need to look in what they say. And above all, we need to add value. Rather than exporting green beans, we need to export roasted coffee. And then rather than exporting the cocoa pops, we need to transform it. Value addition for our exports. I know at the moment to export intermediate goods, at its primary stage, really there's no form of value addition to most of those products. So Africa really they need to be rapid, they need to be investments. We need to look out for means of attracting FDIs in adding values to our minerals, first of all, and then you look out for agricultural product. And then I would also suggest that the issue of trade relationship, it's high time African stop, maybe African countries, okay, for instance, take Ghana, having an isolated relationship with, let's say, EU or America or US. We need to go as a bloc. So if we cannot go as a bloc as Africans, we can go regionally, of which all 54, 55 countries are member states of one economic community or the other. So it's really important we come together and then above all, African leaders need to invest in infrastructure and technology. That is really, look out for landlocked countries. They have difficulty logistics, moving products or for agricultural products and then transporting their goods is really a challenge. So we need to invest rapidly, although the African Development Bank is putting so much effort which against that, but we really need to invest more. And then technology. Right now, it's becoming, everything is becoming digital. Trading services is not is at the front of it, adding so much to global trade now. So we really need to leverage on trading services, which the AFCFT even has a protocol on trading services, of which 5 sectors have been liberalized: communications, financial sector, we have transport sector, tourism and trade related, and business and professional services. So we really need to individually, we really need to leverage on these services and then expand beyond the ores, beyond the minerals, beyond the fuels we have of that. We need to take advantage, ensure we diversify our economy. And then it's also an opportunity for Africans to look out for other market opportunities. And if you're looking at intermediate goods, we really trade with the US as at 2021, 2022 was around 6.4%. We trade more with the Asian markets, with China, with the likes of China, India, and then we also trade with EU as well. But it's really important. We need to look inward. And then the good news there is a product in high demand. If you check, exports has really been on the rise since 2021. That is first of all because of the price of our product in the international market. Then we're exporting more. So it's really important we leverage on this, look for more market opportunities, and try to see how we can grow our economy and then leverage on the AFCFTA.
All right, thank you so much, Anthony. Let me also hear your thoughts on that as well, Ashraf. And looking at the aspect of the fact that the AGOA is actually set to expire in September 2020, most likely with everything happening. And now it seems like there is no clear path to renew. Exporters rather in Africa, they might face sudden cost spikes. So what will the plan be for African exporters in this particular situation that we're in right now?
I mean, I would go along the sides as my friend just did. You mentioned basically, looking towards, working with more the regional blocks and to solidify partnerships and develop new markets. And at the end, you look at what's happening and what's causing all of that from the US. I mean, the major trading partners is like Mexico, China, India, Canada. They are the ones suffering most out of this. And obviously, you will see a kind of a polarized world where the US is on one side, and then you've got all the BRICS countries and Europe and Asia on the other side, and trying to obviously act together in response to that. And it's an opportunity for Africa to develop more with these trading partners and to develop new agreements and to have preferential market access, etc., so that we can develop these new partnerships going forward in replacement of AGOA. If, obviously, this is not renewed again in September 2025 when it expires after 10-year extension. So that is a great opportunity, and we need to capitalize on that, and we need to urgently to start developing these dialogues. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I was thinking in terms of the actual internal issues that Africa faces on its own, because it's not just about the partnership, but we need to get our act together as Africa itself. We need to encourage investment to Africa. We need to create the necessary conditions where investors feel encouraged, feel safe investing in Africa. We need to create the governance structures, the policies, the institutions to create that stability and predictability, because what investors don't like is predictability in their investment over time. So if we create that environment, we can encourage investments. The European partners are there to invest. China is here to invest as well. And I'm sure India is looking to do more of that going forward. So it's, for me, I think it's a great opportunity to capitalize on that and move fast.
Absolutely, we really do need to ensure that we remove, because there's a lot of uncertainties when it comes to investing in Africa, which is why some people might not want to put their money in there. So yeah, that's definitely we need to get our act right on. And I mean, we're running out of time, but I also want to touch a bit on this topic, and that is the issue of sustainable development. During the current uncertainties, do you think that the push for sustainable development will stand, especially when these trade shocks might threaten basic survival? How do you think we can ensure that we lose view of balancing out our goal to still develop sustainably and not just push for economic development? Because in times like this, when there's a lot of pressure, we might now start, of course, maybe doubling down on fossil fuels and all those things that we're not supposed to be doing, especially for the good of the environment. So how do you add that we balance that out?
Yeah, look, it's tough. Sustainability, unfortunately, can't take a back seat.
Yeah.
We really need to look at integrating this into our survival plan, if you wish. Green growth will definitely create jobs. It will help build resilience. It will also attract future-oriented investors. Those investors who are obviously like-minded values in terms of looking at the future, people and planet-oriented fashion. So we definitely need, and the government should design also stimulus and trade responses that are climate smart, renewable infrastructure, green manufacturing, sustainable agriculture. That's the real long game. We can't ignore it. We can't just put it aside and start going back to what we should not be doing. It is going to be tough, but the opportunities are there, and the long-term outcome and rewards are there for us to grab. We just have to be steady about it.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Asha. Let me also hear your thoughts on that as well. Do you think the Sustainable Development Goals will stand now that we are in this sort of shock through the global system? How do you think we should approach it?
Okay, well, for my, even first of all, this announcement, health-related SDGs are already having issues in Africa.
Yeah.
So the announcement, definitely it would, but we look forward to our leaders being deliberate. I was always pitch it up on our leaders, because we've relied so much on foreign aid, we've relied so much on external financing for most of our projects. I believe for trade-related SDGs, it's really it's going to take a toll on them. But like I said, the good thing about it is Africa already has good trade relationship with other climes apart from the US. And then if you check statistics, there's been a drop with aid to Africa, particularly from the US.
Yeah.
Even if it was peaking at some point. And then, like I said, there are different angles to go through it. We really need to go for FDIs to really achieve that. Sustainable development 2030, it's really close, 5 from now. I believe, there's a lot we can do about it. But I would still say this. These are shocks that happen most time. Highest are projections. African projection are good rates projected by African Development Bank for 4.3% would definitely drop. And then it will affect from zero hunger to poverty. But if we trade more with ourselves, we can sit back and set good benchmarks and meet them up. The major problem we're having in Africa is maybe the issue of poverty and the issue of food security, of which we already have the airline, is just to make sure we upscale productions, and then see how we can ourselves. And for other minerals, yeah, there are already markets for them. So beyond the US, African can definitely survive. But it's just that the duty-free market access we have, which regards the AGOA, we definitely shake now. Some would say we might not have fully technically been taken off. Some would say it's still subsisting, but let's see. These ahead are really going to be interesting in the trade ecosystem, especially as it concerns Africa. But the news is, I would always say this: the AFCFTA is a game changer. So the AFCFTA can still get up, and then we can still mainstream our SDGs, possible outcomes and goals to ensure we use the AFCFTA to achieve it.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're wrapping up the program now, but before we close, I just want to get your final thoughts on everything that has been said. And if, for instance, if you were to give an advice to Trump, of course, none of us might ever get that opportunity, but if you were to give an advice to Trump on, probably going back on this decision or in some sort of way shaping the decisions he has taken, what would you advise him to do?
I'll still advise. We've always operated at the global trade level, global ecosystem. Have always operated at the multilateral level. You understand? So it's really important. There is need to sit back and negotiate. If you don't add to the terms of our trade, you sit back and say, okay, let's change A, B, C. So it's really important that it shouldn't be targeted at maybe some countries, or maybe you're having certain. So it's good you come. It's WTO. I would still say that where negotiations are, and then tariffs. Currently we have the dispute settlement system, and there's actually a benchmark, an average tariff that most of these countries are supposed to charge.
Yes.
So it's important we go back and then dust it up. This idea of moving to a unilateral trade system is not. It won't go well for us. If China decides to set up to retaliate, to put up retaliative tariffs, which they have, and then it might escalate. And then you look at it coming from its own angle, and then the CIS, that is the Commonwealth independent states, bringing up their region, coming to put up theirs, and then the Asian. So it's really going to make trade really intensify. My move towards there are projections that if this continues to escalate, we might move towards the 2007-2008 crisis. This one might not have financial crisis, but the trade crisis in the world. So it's really important that President lays his guard down, call for negotiation, and then directly make moves to ensure US increase its productivity, to ensure rather than a trade deficit, a trade surplus is pushed for. Their market, and Africa happens to be over 1.3 billion people. So that's a large market access of which the US can leverage on. So it's really important we get to do that. And like I said, China came up with a model that across boards, across your per capita income, they had products that could feed the market. So if US can adopt same trade strategy, I think the issue of trade deficit they are recording at the moment will be a thing past. So the president needs to think, and then understand the role of America in the global trade ecosystem. First of all, understand that Americans can be compared to maybe any country in Africa or individual. So it's time to understand their role, stick to it, and then promote multilateralism. Above all, globalization has come to stay. So we need to, as much as push for that, and ensure even the smaller nations are giving aid and support to grow, and then get to everything. And then the SDG as well is achieved. So it's a blue. In fact, it's like I said, when I was doing the analysis, it affects everything. So just the tariff announcement affects even SDG outcomes that we are expecting by 2030, especially in Africa and even Caribbean and other Pacific regions. So it's important he sits back and then they talk this out together, and then ensure we get a better.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And let me also hear your thoughts on that, Ashraf, as well. What advice would you give to Trump on how to, at least reshape this in some sort of way? And like Anthony is putting out, at least, if we can have some renegotiations and all of that, be a better way to go. But let us hear your thoughts on that as well before we wrap up the program.
Look, I think if I have to give an advice to Trump, it would be get better advisors. It's clearly the case that he's being wrongly advised on this. definitely get better advice. And
Yeah,
even
that's a good
Elon Musk,
one.
he's saying that they are doing the wrong thing. And
Mm,
obviously, he was saying that in Europe and the US, there should be no tariffs in place. In fact, this morning I
mm,
heard that even Europe now is proposing that there's a no tariff, system between Europe. I think this is a great idea going forward, and I think even give a better chance for the economy to rebound and ignite. So going back to the old trade wars of the past, 60, 70 years ago, it's not going to work. So it's hurting America the most. I mean, think about
mm,
Apple being manufactured in China, right? And all these products are now going back into the US 104% tariffs on them. I mean, that's crazy. Doesn't make sense. Tesla making its EV cars with parts coming from Asia. All of this is going to cost a lot more, which is why all these tanking. It does not make sense at all. And yeah, it's time for Trump to maybe get to his senses. It doesn't seem that he's the kind of character that will obviously go back on his policies, but his advisors will definitely need to put that in one way or another. Yesterday we heard that there would potentially be a pause of 30 days. The stock markets rebound. There was a peak at around 10:15 a.m. if I'm not mistaken, and then they clear the rumors and said that he's steady, he's going to do that, and the market just plunged again. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely have to go beyond this, and there definitely needs to be a rethink of this approach. It doesn't make sense to go down that route again.
mm.
Yeah, and so will he push back? Will he cancel these tariffs? We don't know. It's possible, but we cannot build our plans on hope. Policy
Yeah.
under Trump to be erratic and driven by
Mm,
political cycles. So we should assume that the tariff here to stay and basically use
yeah.
this window to push forward with structural reforms and move for
Mm.
regional trade and develop new partnerships.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. A really good one there. And also to my guest here in the studio, Anthony. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you all so much for joining on the conversation. As we wrap up today's conversation, one thing is clear, though, that the tremors from this trade upheaval won't stop at America's borders. The world is watching a once dominant power retreat into protectionism, like we've seen, while the ripple effects threaten to do years of fragile progress. Especially here in Africa, tariffs may be imposed in Washington, but their impact is felt in our factories, our ports, and our already stretched budgets. What's happening isn't just a trade rift, it's a test of resilience. For African economies, this is a movement that demands clarity, strategy, and courage. Whether it's safeguarding our green industries, securing investment, or rethinking our trade alliances, like my guests have alluded to, Africa must act with urgency, but and that's because the cost of silence is, very deep. So it's something we must all look into. And that's a wrap on today's program and today's episode of Policy on the Go. Many thanks for watching. I'm Tonya Gubanjo. It's bye for now.